Welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs.
Welcome back to Your Family Dog podcast. I'm Tina Spring, and I'm joined today by my lovely, smart, and pretty co-host, Julie Banana Fudge Smith. And today we're going to talk about how to socialize your dog in COVID during a pandemic, which has created lots of fascinating fallout for our dogs and the families we work with. So, as is tradition, I introduce the topic, and Julie gets the first comment.
Yay! Because this is a tough comment, and because I think one of the interesting phenomenon of this COVID pandemic is everybody's like, oh, great. Since we have to be stuck at home, this is the perfect time to get a puppy. So let's get a puppy because we can really train it and we'll be there and then everything will be fine when we head back. And I understand the logic behind that. But as my vet tells me, he goes, Julie, you're going to be busy for the next 2 years. And the reason for that is part and parcel of a new puppy is not just teaching your puppy appropriate use of his mouth. It's not just teaching your puppy how to be house trained. It's not just teaching your puppy how to sit and lay down and be polite in greeting guests. Because one, it's hard to practice because none of us have any guests coming over. Those things are not unimportant. They are very important. But one of the other things that's really important is properly socializing your dog. Now, we did an episode on enrichment as socialization, and I think that that's something that you can do during COVID is you can bring the world to your dog in a variety of ways. You can allow him to sniff the tires of all the cars parked on the street, and you can get him out to stand on the corner, say in front of the library here in Granville, and give him treats as people walk by. So he begins to see some things, see some other dogs, see some other people. But socialization also means that your dog has a wide variety of exposure to people, places, things, substrates, and experiences in a positive way. Because what we want is our dogs during this crucial socialization period, which depending on the expert you talk to, most agree it starts about 3 weeks of age, but when it ends is quite variable according to the experts. It can be anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks, depending on who you're talking to and what breed you're talking about. So you don't have a long time for your dog socialization window to be open. So in order to provide him with a wide variety of people, places, things, and experiences that he can draw on in a positive way as an adult dog, we generally recommend that a dog meet like 100 people or 250 people because you're sure to have him meet a wide variety of tall, short, skinny, wide, curly hair, dark hair, light hair, glasses, sunglasses, hats, no hats, scarves, puffy coats, snow coats, all kinds of things for the dog to, this is an okay thing. So as an adult dog, when I encounter something similar, I have this Rolodex of experience that tells me that this is a safe thing. The problem comes, how do we do this when we're in lockdown or when we're not supposed to be closer to people than 6 feet? Well, one of the things that I tell people is, you know what? Most leashes are 6 feet long, folks. So if you are out walking your dog, somebody wants to greet or say hi to your dog, at the end of the leash, a quick little greeting might not be one bad way for your dog to be able to meet more people. But I think that this is something that is a dilemma, and that people who are concerned about exposure and about getting out, one of the problems is that their dogs are suffering because they're not getting the exposure that they need to become more balanced adult dogs. So one of the things that I recommend is if your dog does like to walk, make sure you get out and walk in a wide variety of places. Make sure you walk in a park. Make sure you walk downtown. You walk around. You can even drive to a different neighborhood. I've done that. driven my dog to a different neighborhood to walk around that because that's all the kinds of new scents and smells and sights, and maybe I'll meet a few new people along the way. So you think about places you can go out with your dog and walk, or even sit and watch the world go by. There's a place in New Albany, which is a little town near me, where they have a square where there's a Starbucks and a library and some benches, and you can sit in the bench, be away from people, and yet watch the people going in and out of Starbucks and people going in and out of the library. So those are some of the ways in which I think you can get your dog exposed to a bit more. What do you think, Tina? What do you have in mind for exposing dogs socially during these times?
So I think people over-socialize dogs the vast majority of time. I think what the average family thinks socialization is and what socialization actually is are two really disparate things. So I stole this from Nando Brown, so I'll own that I stole this from him. I love his rule of threes. So 1 in 3 dogs or people my dog has to ignore. 1 in 3 they get to say, hey, how are you? And 1 in 3 they get to have greater interaction with. And so I actually think the pandemic's fantastic for that, because we're not approaching everybody. We're not having our dog run up and tackle every little kid they see. They're not running up and jumping on every other dog's head. I actually think this pandemic is probably really good for dogs. It's probably good for people in some ways too. So yes, we are all, most of us, going for walks in the neighborhood. Go to a different neighborhood. Go walk around a plaza. Go walk based on how relaxed your puppy is, so that they're taking in stimuli but not necessarily touching all the time. They get to see all different kinds of people, right? Here, again, I'm in Georgia, so today it's almost 60 degrees. My puppy people, hopefully, are grabbing a cup of coffee and they're going and sitting outside of the Kroger and watching customers go in and out of the Kroger while feeding their puppy little bits of string cheese, so that the puppy gets to see people with walkers and people with masks on, and people who smoke, and people who are diabetic, and people who are worried, and people who are not worried, and watch the busy mom toting 3 kids. I think so much of socialization is just taking in the stimuli, but not actually touching. So I actually think we'll end up with much better, more well-rounded puppies if people get out and do that work, even if it's at the end of their driveway.
I do appreciate what you're saying. I think you've got a point. I need to think about this a little bit, but I think you're really right. The problem is I'm not seeing people getting out at all. I'm seeing puppies who are completely isolated within the home, so that we're not even getting that sort of remote stimulation or that remote experience of watching stuff. And so I think that what we need to be encouraging people to do during this pandemic is you cannot stay at home in your living room with your puppy, so that by the time your puppy is 6 months of age, he's met 3 people and seen your living room and your backyard and your kitchen.
While prime socialization is over somewhere between 11 and 16 weeks, heck, you and I are both old enough. There was a time you didn't even train a puppy until they were 6 months old. That was the industry standard.
Right.
So all is not lost if the people stay home for 3 months. Like, it's not the end of the world. If they're doing good exposure to things in their home, then even that older puppy that right now, I have a 10-year-old dog that I am re-socializing. He is learning how to keep his marbles in his head when he sees new people and when he sees new dogs. That's a new skill for him. I just did it 2 years ago with a pug who was over-socialized. So what is your expectation for your dog? Like, is your expectation for your dog is that they're supposed to crawl in everybody's mouth when they see them? Because that's what I see socialization being taught as today. Like, pre-pandemic, the biggest issue I had was everybody just wants puppy class to be a brawl. a free-for-all of puppies playing. And that's not actually socialization. It's just not. Socialization is taking it all in.
I agree with you, but I also feel too that the dogs I've seen who've had a wider variety of experiences that they have been rewarded for, that we've seen a lot of different people, and I've looked at a lot of different people, and I've talked to a lot of different people, and I've just sort of watched the world a lot more, tend to be a little bit more balanced as an adult dog. And one of the things that in my classes, when I ran classes, is that we didn't have playtime. Well, puppy time we did in my puppy classes. We'd have some playtime at the end. But one of my goals in class was not for all the dogs to be able to have a great time together. The goals in my class was that the dogs learn to pay attention to their owners and learn to work and to realize that I can be around other dogs without losing my mind. So I do think that you're right that socialization can be pushed, like anything can go to an extreme, either no socialization at all, which is damaging to the puppy, or overstimulation or over socialization, which is also damaging to the dog. But I also think too that the more your dog can have positive experiences, the more likely it is in a variety of ways just to see a variety of traits.
So maybe that's the question. Maybe I'm working with a greater number of dogs for whom going for a walk around the block or going to the playground and seeing other people is too much. It's not a positive experience. It's an overwhelmed experience.
Right. I understand. And I've got dogs who are like that too. But I think that you have to kind of find the balance there. But I also think too that and I've got one little dog who's a client right now. I mean, he can't even function on his front porch. He's so
right. So are we blaming that on COVID, or is that just a dog that's poorly bred?
Well, I think it's probably I don't think there's any one cause to poorly functioning dogs. I think that sometimes you have a poorly bred dog who's not perhaps handled well. I mean, they adopt, I can't remember how old he was. They did not adopt him as a puppy. They adopted him as an older dog. I can't remember off the top of my head how old this dog is, but it wasn't 8 weeks old when they got him. Okay.
Right. But I am a professional dog trainer who's very good at my craft, who has raised 2 pot cake from Turks and Caicos, and they're both fearful of new people. They were socialized as best we could. But genetics play such a huge role that there's only, I mean, the second one's better than the first one because I learned things, right? The first one I did what everybody told me to do, and he's definitely more raw. So I think that increasing enrichment, playing games with the dog or the puppy, or going for a walk where the puppy can observe other people is absolutely fine. And then I just give dogs more agency. They don't have to go say hello to everybody. They just don't.
That is one of my cardinal rules, is that each dog has the right. I mean, there's so few things that our dogs get to regulate in their lives, right? They don't really get to say what toys they get to play with, or where they're going to live, or what kind of food they're going to get, or any of that kind of stuff. But they should have the ability to say who they want to meet and for how long. I mean, maybe I just want to go up and sniff you a little bit and that's it. That's fine with me, because I feel like one of the ways in which you can really make a dog much more suspicious and leery and not confident of his life and his and people is by forcing him to meet people when he doesn't want to. So I always believe that a dog has the right to say, sorry, I just don't want to talk to you today. And that's fine. And so I work a lot with people on that, saying give your dog the ability to say who they want to meet and for how long. It could be, I just want to go up and give your shoes a quick sniff, and then I'm a happy dog. And
so that we can do during COVID.
Yes.
Right now harder if you're in Alaska, yes, and there's 4 hours of sunlight and it's super cold and you're going to freeze your eyeballs. if it's cold and rainy and gross here, I'm telling people to go to Lowe's and Home Depot and take cleanup stuff and take your puppy. But I think it's, honestly, I think we overdo socialization far more than we underdo it. That's what I observe in the community. Dogs that are over aroused because they've been forced into more socialization than they're comfortable with. And that's the thing. Like, it's set by the learner. It's not set by me and my checklist. So I am much more about soft socialization. So take the puppy to a playground with no children on it, because right now there are no children on the playground, and let your puppy see the swing set move and step on the slide and step on the, all the different kinds of equipment and sniff it all and check it all out and eat some treats and go home. And then, go to the local baseball diamond and climb up and down the bleachers with your puppy. Like, there are lots of things we can do. Go to a park and let your puppy splash around in the creek. There's an awful lot we can do. We can also, honestly, bring balloons home from the grocery store, or let our puppy help unpack the groceries. Like, obviously, don't let them eat things they're not supposed to eat, but let them check out the stuff that they want to check out.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I try to tell people, too, is you don't have to do 8 hours of socialization every day. Where I'm talking, as you said, take the puppy out to do one thing. Go walk around Granville once and go home. You have some time, but also too, this should, the other thing, as I tell people, is make sure you go out with a whole bunch of treats, because this should all be paired with, really positive things. So that the other thing I have found too is so should something go a bit sideways, if you've got a whole bunch of treats and you can get your dog to redirect to you and eat chicken and get out of the situation, you're going to at least minimize some of the more deleterious effects that can happen sometimes when things don't go the way you want them to. So I think that one of the keys here is to let the dog take the lead on some of this stuff. Make sure you have a lot of tasty treats so that your dog can have something to turn and focus on, or be rewarded for, making good decisions. And don't try to do too much at once. I think, some every day, and meeting some people every day, or seeing some people, or seeing a new environment, or driving to a new neighborhood, a little bit every day is going to build the resilient dog. And, you're right. Genetics are huge. Some dogs are just a lot more reticent. And so I think you need to remember that with those dogs, they need a lot more reinforcement. A little scared, but I leaned in and looked. Great. You can have a huge piece of chicken and we're going to go. So work with these reticent dogs. They need to be really well reinforced.
And I would say, actually, if anything, I work on people getting more careful and slow with the breeds that humans get super excited about, right? It's very easy to overwhelm and blow out and create a fearful Great Dane puppy, because everybody loses their marbles like, oh my gosh, it's a Great Dane, right? So there are my pug. Oh, for goodness sakes. Like, everyone who sees a pug screams. I don't know what that is. Like, it's thank God he's deaf. So there are breeds that humans just naturally get more excited about. And in my experience, those are often the breeds that humans are rushing them to say hello, because the human is meeting, the stranger is meeting their own needs. Like, oh my gosh, the doodle looks like a giant stuffed animal, so we should just hug him and kiss him. And very easy to overwhelm that doodle puppy.
Yes, I agree. We found that with our Berners.
Yes.
Bernese Mountain Dogs, people are just like, holy cow. Not so much because you see a lot more of them now, but when we had our Berners, they weren't nearly as common, and people were like, they were just showstoppers. People would just stop
They're
us.
striking.
Yes.
They're really, and so I see it. There are some specific breed groups I see it with. I see it with pugs. I see it with Bostons. I see it with Cavaliers. I see it with the assorted doodles, all the Flufadors. I see it with massive breeds, like the Mastiff breeds, Rotties. Like, any of the breeds that we have a strong opinion about. Sometimes it's harder, actually, I think, for like the Rottweilers of the world, where, a third of us think that they're magnificent, a third of us are terrified of them, and a third of us don't really like dogs to begin with. So the dogs get shunned by the people who are more concerned about them, like, oh, yuck, that's a XYZ. The other part of the population they're dealing with are people who bum rush them and are super excited to see them and to make friends. And so again, like I know that it's a controversial position to have. Everybody is like socialization, socialization, socialization. And we have crazy bastardized that term and made it into something it was never intended to be. It is not about going through the checklist with the puppy. It is about setting up experiences and letting the puppy experience safely and happily for whatever that means for that puppy. So I think COVID's probably going to be pretty good for a lot of dogs because things are going at a slower pace. And in my experience, it's far easier to later on introduce a dog positively to new things than it is to overcome negative experiences, overwhelming experiences, overstimulated experiences. So, I overstimulated and oversocialized Marco, and it totally backfired. Like, I have a dog who is really kind of doesn't trust that I'm going to keep him safe and let him move at his own pace. Right. So I just learned a lot, and, sadly he's paid the price, but I also have a dog that it takes about 10 minutes to introduce to a new person. Right. I don't think that that's inappropriate. I mean, surely he should be allowed to have 10 minutes to go, yeah, okay, I decided you're okay. So I think I don't know. I know I have a controversial position on it that is contrary to what a lot of people think. Maybe part of it is that I'm in a college town and I see dogs, have in the past seen dogs dragged to football games and sorority house parties and,
Oh, I agree. I think
breweries.
There are certainly like my skin just crawls every time I see somebody take their dog to the fireworks or
a parade.
Parade, yeah. So yeah, it's just like, really seriously, I don't think your dog needs to have the marching band right on top of them, or the fire truck, or the police car, right in front of them. I just think that I mean, it's terrifying for my grandbabies. I don't think it's going to be all that great for my dog. Now, just to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Sure.
I think that you have some really strong points about needing to allow the learner to assess the situation and to be careful that you don't overwhelm a dog in any given situation. On the other hand, I've also seen dogs who by 8 months of age, 6 to 8 months of age, have met two people and they can't function. They simply cannot function. They have not been out of their house. They haven't, they haven't really seen anybody. They have no ability. They have no experiences in their Rolodex, right, to put anything into context. And some of those dogs are nearly impossible to bring back. They have some of them.
I don't think so. I bring those dogs back all the time. It's not impossible. It's just not. Now, if you're trying to do it in the middle of a huge fear stage, yeah. But no, it's not impossible. There is a distance that they can take in another human being that they're okay. And it may be that they have to learn how to be on the front porch without a stranger before they learn to be on the front porch with a stranger. It may be that you have a dog that needs some medications to increase neuroplasticity. But I will also tell you, like, that is such I work with feral dogs, wild dogs being asked to live in New York City. And yet we managed to get it done. So that what I will say is, like, no, they actually do learn how to do it. when you have a dog that is having that big a thing, I don't think that's about they've been home for 8 months. I think that's about breeding. And I can make a perfectly cogent argument that it's also about when we have attempted to socialize, we did not socialize. We did not let that puppy set the pace. Instead, we forced them into overwhelming, overstimulating by accident, not because everybody's trying to be a jerk. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But we were not letting the puppy set the pace. Maybe the puppy needs to be inside with the front door to the porch open, but not actually on the landing. Like, there is, and if the dog is that raw, if they're that sensitive, that is about something other than socialization. That's a brain that's not functioning the way it should function. It's not managing stimulus the way a brain should manage stimulus. So I think that's an outlier in my experience. It's just an outlier. I work with incredibly fearful dogs that have been recovered from a puppy mill or from a hoarding situation where they've never, they're 6 years old coming out of a hoarding situation. It's literally lived in a pen in the backyard with 38 other dogs, starving to death. And yet we manage to get those dogs not as social as they would have been if they had not gone through all of that. But we get them to a place that they can typically walk around and take the world in. And maybe they're not going to be best friends with everybody, but they can handle it. They can handle it. So I just, in my experience, the two you're talking about, I would be looking at a bunch of other stuff. I'd be looking at medical stuff. I'd be looking at a bunch of other stuff. And I would say that level of sensitivity isn't, I don't think that would have been changed significantly by doing socialization without COVID. I see far more that the dogs like you're talking about were taking too big a bite of the apple. They're being rushed into a situation when they're not handling the stimulus of they can't handle the environment without more. Right? So until the dog can lay on the front porch and take a nap with just you on a rainy day, when there's not the hustle and bustle of people going by, they're probably not going to handle that with a dog trainer on the front porch with you. And then I would ask the question, can that dog handle being in the living room with the dog trainer? Like, can he settle out and take a nap even though the dog trainer is in the room? If not, then we're taking things too far too fast. It means either adjust the environment or better living through pharmacology. And of course, I'm always going to talk about sleep, nutrition. Like, are they eating a food that they're starving of nutrients, which can happen, just like for us, right? We can eat food all day long and be morbidly obese and still be nutritionally starving. So, I think the dog you're talking about, if I remember correctly, is a Cavalier or a Cavalier Cross. Is that correct?
One of them was a Schnauzer, and one of them, was a little Cavalier Cross who now is on medication. And so he's I will be seeing him in about a week or two after his medications had a chance to get into his system. And these are great owners, and they care deeply about this dog. And life is just hard, and he is in emotional pain. And so we talked a lot about, there's not much we can do if he won't take treats, and it's really hard to do counter conditioning if you're not going to take a treat. And we can't really help him until he's out of complete and utter panic mode at all times. So one of the things
so if he's in complete and utter panic mode all the time, of course you can't socialize that dog. He hasn't habituated to anything. Right. So how I would start attempting, and I think meds are absolutely called for in that case, but and I think a veterinary behaviorist would agree with me, right? We have a dog who can't handle a baseline, but how I might be doing socialization is scent of new people. Or I might be doing socialization with the sounds of recordings of people. Or I might jump on a Zoom call with that family and I'm making different human voices come through the computer. Like, we can tease apart exposures so that that dog gets itty bitty bits that are manageable to them. But you're right, a dog who can't eat during an exposure, like, yeah, we're talking about a dog who is having an adrenal response that is out of proportion with what's being asked of them. And that's typically like an actual physical problem. Like that's a medical issue.
Right. So we'll see how he is after he's been on his meds for a few weeks. And if we're not seeing a reduction in some of this reactivity, and then we can go from there. And you're right. I mean, if the dog is in complete panic mode, you can't socialize it. I do think, though, that I would much rather, and I think you're right. I think there is, in fact, we did an episode with Christopher Pockle about overstimulation in socialization. So I think there's got to be a balance that people can strike, because I also don't think that you really want to just keep your dog inside at all times during COVID. So I think trying to find that balance between getting out, seeing new, getting to new places and new experiences and new smells and seeing people even from a distance and getting some treats and saying, look, it's a really, really tall guy. We've never seen anybody that tall before. Isn't that interesting? And have a piece of chicken.
So yes, I think it depends on the dog, right? This little dog that you're talking about that is so
but I'm talking about for most people who picked up a lab puppy during COVID who is not having these extreme reactions,
right,
does need to get some socialization during this time period, because I don't actually want them to have to do all kinds of counter conditioning later on. I'd just as soon have them have the socialization experiences that are appropriate for that dog, so that if we have to counter condition or we have to get them used to something, it's not everything.
So obviously I'm not advocating locking them in a closet. and it's honestly a little frustrating that it would be taken that way. I am not saying don't do socialization. What I am saying is that I don't think taking socialization slowly, the way that COVID has forced us all to do, is a bad thing.
Okay. I think that that's a very legitimate viewpoint. I think
and I would also say that it is not counter conditioning if it is a novel experience.
Right. Okay.
So if you have a dog who has not had an experience, right? He's never seen a hot air balloon. I'll just pull that one out of my keister, right? So most of us have not given our dogs exposures to hot air balloons. But boy, when we see a hot air balloon, our brains go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? We do not have to counter condition hot air balloons. The dog's never seen one. It's a novel experience. Obviously, we don't want one landing in our side yard. We're going to give that some distance, but we're going to sit with our dog and marvel at the hot air balloon. That is what I am talking about when we're dealing with these dogs that are a little bit older, who haven't had the benefit or torture of what most people in the United States call socialization now, right? It's just learning to take in the environment. That is what socialization is.
Right. Well, I think about in Europe, like in France, or even England, where dogs have more access. Like you see people sitting in cafes with their dogs. And I don't know if we have the same level of angst in dogs in Europe as we have here. If these dogs, most of them are not neutered or spayed, right? And yet we seem to have a nice population of dogs who are very comfortable in the world in which they live.
But they're not touched by every other person. Like, not everybody runs up and pets everybody else's dog, and not everybody takes their dog to greet that dog. Those dogs are given space, and they're not expected to be hypersocial. They're expected to be ignored. I think we overdo it in the United States, and I think it backfires. And then we blame the dog. The dog pays the price.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I was thinking about my Bingley, who was overwhelmed by a couple of dogs when he was very little. And so he was always much more reticent with dogs. Not that he didn't like them, but he was a little bit more reticent with them. And I did a lot of counter conditioning to other dogs and stuff. But one of the best things that happened to him was Buckley, our Bernese mountain dog, because we would be out walking and people would like, oh, it's a Bernese mountain dog. Burmese is what they would say. It's a Bernese, as in Bern, Switzerland, not Burma. Bernese mountain dog. And they would gush over Buckley, and Bingley would just stand by my side. And he was perfectly content just to watch all these happenings and not necessarily be involved himself. And then people would just get so apologetic. Oh, I'm so sorry. You're really handsome too. And I would say, it's fine. He's fine. He's perfectly happy right where he's at. We're out for a walk and this is serious business. So he's okay. So I think sometimes just so Buckley was the saving grace for Bingley, because then nobody noticed Bingley, which he was fine with. And I was fine with. So I think a lot of it is knowing what is right and good and appropriate for your dog. Buckley solicited attention from everybody. I mean, if we would stop and people would buy, he's like, oh, hello, I'm sure you want to come and talk to me. And people generally did. And he was very good and very gentle with them as well. So, but that's just who he was. That's not necessarily who I expected Bingley to be. So you got to work.
I think that's kind of my point, right? That I think we a lot of times expect everybody to be the hypersocial, like everybody's supposed to be an extrovert. All the dogs are supposed to be super extroverted and love people and love other dogs, and that's what I want. And I'm like, how about we instead set a goal that our dog ignores the vast majority of that stuff, and that the dog has a method, a modality to have greater interaction based on who that dog is. And so like for the pug, that's, like every layer of, oh my goodness, I'm here to love you. Like my Shorty, my Jack Russell, would have loved the job as the people greeter at Walmart. He liked everybody. He wanted to say hello to everybody. And then that was enough. Not so much with all the touching. Right. And he was never mean about it. He was never ugly about it. He just saved that level of intimacy for his family, for people that, his friends. It wasn't something given to every single individual or dog that he met. And he really liked other dogs. He really liked other people. He just didn't necessarily want kisses from everybody.
Right. And sometimes I'd take Bingley to the dog park, and he was much more interested because dog park had this nice big field, and I would go when I knew there weren't going to be a lot of dogs there, and I could really haul off and throw the ball for him because his biggest thing was to run as hard as he could to get balls. So I would always take like 5 tennis balls with me so that if somebody stole one of his balls, I always had another one for him. And other dogs would want to play with him, and he's like, well, sorry, I'm playing with my person. And we would go off to the end of the dog park where most of the field was, where nobody else was, and we could play. But it was nice because it was a nice fenced-in big field that I could play ball with him and really let him rip. But it never bothered me that he wasn't particularly interested in playing with other dogs because he was a happy, content companion, and he was who he was. And that was absolutely, fine by me. So I think though that's what socialization may perhaps teach you is as you try to expose your dogs to some of these things in a gentle way, is it's going to help you learn and figure out who your dog is. So I think that if you are careful about your socialization, that you make it positive and you try to give your dog some new experiences, some chances to see some new things, to smell some new smells, and watch his response, you're going to get a much better idea of who your dog is and how he wants to interact with the world. So I think socialization can kind of work to be a way in which you get to know who your pet is. So
absolutely. Right. And shouldn't they get the benefit of that choice? So Family Pause, Jen Shryock's awesome program, talks about invites decrease bites, right? And we all, like, I think bites is probably too extreme. Most of us are like, if our dog bit someone, we would lose our marbles, right? But what I would say is there's not a really catchy way that I found anyway to say that invites encourage polite interaction. It gives more choice to the dog, which of course reduces conflict. Right. So if I am allowed to say no to something, it actually makes it easier for me to say yes, because I have a greater amount of agency about when I can turn it off and make it stop. Right. So my experience is when we give, whether a dog is hypersocial, right? So the pug, who's like the social butterfly of the group, everybody is his new best friend, is zero loyalty, or whether we're talking about a dog who's more sensitive, the more that we wait until the dog's brain is settled and calm, like calm, gentle, and fair, to go back to Colleen, and the dog calmly goes and greets the person, it also means our dog is taking in, our puppy is taking in what is the other living creature signaling and experiencing. Like, does the person want to say hello to me, or does the person really a cat person and doesn't really like dogs or is afraid of dogs? So I think, again, going places, having your dog watch things is super, super advantageous without all the touching. I think when we let the dog set the pace of the touching, it just goes better. And I think for lots of people, they think socialization means the dog's roughhousing or everybody cuddling their dog. And I don't think that is socialization. I don't.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean when I'm talking about like wrangling this whole, what does socialization mean? It's about seasoning the dog to take in experience.
I agree. All right.
I think COVID, it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure I'm probably going to be wrong in some ways, but my experience of all of it is I am not seeing puppies come into my group classes who have been locked down for months and months and months and months. I am not seeing them have huge, horrible negative side effects about having been in their home. I'm not seeing that. What I'm seeing is puppies who are a little bit slower to greet and are more polite doing that, and that we're doing that socialization more softly. They're more thoughtful. I actually kind of like it better. But I suppose we all, like, no, that's not going to suit everybody.
Yeah. But, teaching a dog, but I don't think anybody really wants to be overwhelmed by a dog either. So if dogs are approaching people more softly and with a little bit more caution, maybe that's not a bad thing either. I think that's probably a good thing overall.
Yeah, like I get that complaint a lot, right? The dog who is jumping on everybody because they're an overly enthusiastic greeter.
Yeah, which could also mean they need some sleep.
Right, sleep, and it could be that they need the greeting slowed down because it's overwhelming to them.
So if you want to slow down the greeting, what do you recommend? The dog be on a leash?
Yeah, I do a lot of park and pay.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I couple that with kind of monitoring where the dog's brain is. So I love Colleen's calm, gentle, and fair. Like if the dog is straining to say hello to the person, I don't really let them do this. I don't let them proceed, because that is not calm, gentle, and fair. Like, they're going to make bad decisions because they're overexcited, right? We're going to make bad decisions at anywhere that there's an extreme. So if we're extremely afraid, we're going to make bad decisions. If we're super overexcited and overstimulated, we're going to make bad decisions. So I do a lot of puppy socialization of, you set up a situation where a puppy could calmly say hello, but they're not required to, they're not forced to, and they're not allowed to if they're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So like in our class, we just say if they still have the crazy eyes. Right? Like
Right.
if they're like, "Oh my God, there's another person," I'm like, "Right, we don't say hello during that because it's like a drunk college student. Like, what are we doing? Like, no, you're not. You're too excited. You're not listening to social cues. You're not making rational decisions. You're just high. So settle out, and then once you calm down, then you can quietly go say hello. Because what I have observed is the trip from that super excited greeting to mouthing and chewing and biting and getting overstimulated and scaring themselves is a really short trip because the brain is already overreacting.
Right.
Is that a good way to explain it?
That is a good way to explain it. Okay, so if we wanted to do a summary of what we've talked about, I think it's basically pay attention to your dog and his temperament. Make sure that when you are out and about and trying to give your dog some experiences, that you take his lead for the level of exposure that will make him comfortable in that situation. Make sure you have a lot of tasty treats with you so that you can reward, especially if you have a timid dog, you can reward. Oh, look, I lean in and I show some interest.
Right.
Great. I'm going to give you a piece of chicken. I'm not going to force you to go over and talk.
Puppy. Yes, absolutely. And lots of don't always walk in the same neighborhood. Don't always go to the same grocery store. Like if you're going to go sit outside the grocery store, don't always go to the same grocery store. Don't always go the same day and time. Like put a pair of garden gloves on, ask your kids to put on their Halloween costume. I think most of us have a pod of people who we're currently feeling really safe with COVID. Have your pod come and visit, but maybe wear a funny hat or funny sunglasses, right? Or it's all of the things. You had a really beautiful list at the start that I can't, right? It's different strata, it's scent, it's visual, it's auditory, it's all of those things. So you can totally play the sounds of kids playing off YouTube. You can totally play that and let your puppy have a Kong while that's happening. Or give your puppy a bully stick sitting outside of the grocery store watching the senior citizens go in and out on Senior Citizen Day.
Right.
For the ones who are doing that. Not everybody's doing that. Some people are just doing drive up. Right. But I mean, there are stores that are open, right? Even during lockdown, grocery stores are open. You might stand on the apron far enough away that you feel comfortable, which is probably how close your puppy's going to be and be comfortable. And they can watch people go in and out. Mm-hmm. There are gas stations. Everybody will be using a gas station, whether we're in lockdown or not. And then get creative about take your puppy to your local, what's it called? Parking garage, and feed your puppy hot dog while you go up and down the elevator a couple of times.
Okay. Those are all good things, and all things that you can do and maintain social distance. So, yeah. This is all very good, very interesting, and we would love to hear your feedback on it. So you can let us know what you think about this episode and others.
You can send all of your hate mail to about why I'm wrong
to feedback at yourfamilydogpodcast.com. But thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next time on Your Family Dog.
Thanks for listening to Your Family Dog. Got questions? Interesting idea? Visit www.yourfamilydogpodcast.com to share your thoughts.